everyone, and welcome back to the HCW YouTube channel, and welcome back to the Indie Spotlight, and welcome back to the heartbeat of Kumite, and the man that's already done 5 minute, 10 minute of this interview, but we've had to start again. Alton Thorne, how you doing?
I'm all right, mate. Do I have to pretend like we haven't been speaking for half an hour
No,
already?
that's why I explained it. Yeah, you've
I'm all
so
right, thank you very much.
I've
I'm
learned
doing
some
all...
stuff where I'm gonna have to pretend that I haven't learned it, and then we'll go from there. But we're here for people. Alton knows what it is now. It's a rip-off of This Is Your Life, where we start from how he got into wrestling all the way up until Kumite, which is going to happen this Sunday. So what is your first wrestling memory, Alton?
My... As I've already explained once in great detail, my friend. My nan, when I was younger, got me into wrestling. And I mean super young, like before I could have active memories. I have pictures of me with wrestling stuff, like wrestling rings that were bought as Christmas presents, because my nan used to be a massive World of Sport fan in the 60s and 70s, because there wasn't that much else on TV. And I think, on Sunday, that's what most British people watched at the time.
Yeah.
But by the time I'd come around in 1986, like the World of Sport thing had kind of died a death, and there's still a lot of wrestlers running shows in local areas, but they weren't drawing anymore. And in terms of like British wrestling, I didn't really know it existed. My nan, to compensate for the lack of wrestling in her life, used to go around car boot sales and buy VHS tapes of WWE. And she used to have like a giant kind of cupboard that you'd open, like you'd have to open with both hands and pull, because I don't know if a lot of people these days wouldn't have seen a VHS tape, but unless Rory Coyle's smacking it off somebody's head. But they're big, chunky things. So the cupboard used to be, it was like something like in a library in a child's book, something like that. So it was like quite an ordeal to pull open this cupboard, and then there'd be like these, they were purple wrestling VHSs with like lightning bolts down them for WrestleMania, and I used to like grab them out, and they'd have like the Ultimate Warrior and Andre and Hulk Hogan on the front, and it was mind-blowing to me. It was like this whole ordeal of like, so that was my first wrestling memory, really. It's not even of any wrestling, it's sort of like opening Nana's cupboards and finding like the 2 VHS tape of WrestleMania 4 and those kind of things, and I was hooked from there.
Yeah, and then as you mentioned, prior to the recording going bust, your nan wasn't a massive fan of heels, was she?
No. She was like a proper like brolly basher kind of nan from that era. Like she would have hated the first like 8 years of my career because the whole time I was a heel, and I just thought, if she didn't get the nuance of wrestling, she kind of knew that it was put on, but there's kind of a certain amount of willful ignorance to people of that generation who just didn't want to accept it. So she would have absolutely hated to see me as a heel, but she never got the chance, because about 6 weeks before I made my official debut at House of Pain, she passed away, which was very sad for me, because she'd pretty much been my inspiration. Like, she had multiple sclerosis, and she used to sit in her armchair, and I would sit in her wheelchair, and we'd watch hours of wrestling together. And then when I got a bit older, I used to take her to see local shows. I took her to see a Dragon Gate show.
Okay.
I took her to see TNT on TNA, on time as well. So yeah, when she passed away, it was a really sad moment for me, because I kind of hoped that she would get to see me doing that kind of joint interest that we had. But instead, I took her name was Alton, Frida Alton. So I took her last name as my first name, because I thought if she can't be there physically, then I'll make sure she's kind of there every time I wrestle in one way or another. So yeah.
Okay, and then how did Thorne come about?
Thorne, it's kind of a happy accident, I think. My shoot name is Kevin. So I think in the back of my head, the name Kevin Thorne was probably already there, and I liked the idea of Thorne. Like I like you know, immediately makes you think of something sharp. Um, and it just seemed to fit. So I took that purely because I think Alton Thorne sounded good as well. It rolled off the tongue. There's a couple of O's in there, so it's got a bit of a
Yeah.
ring to it. But then I think later on it kind of you grow into your name as a wrestler, and like I started using thorns as part of my gear, and I had thorns going up my boots, and then as it went on, when I eventually moved into the deathmatch scene, I ended up like literally using thorns in my matches from time to time and stuff. So, you know, it was just a happy accident. It
Yeah.
kind of fell on the name Thorn.
And then, how did you when did you decide that you were going to get into the wrestling?
Well, I didn't know really that it was an option. Like it wasn't like there was loads of advertising for it or anything in the local area. I used to work in a care home, and there was a gentleman there who had quite severe autism, but it didn't necessarily show it. He was uh, high on the spectrum, but could show you wouldn't necessarily know it. And he used to like love Triple H, especially loved Triple H, and he used to like doing the poses and the water spitting, and he'd sometimes grab me and put me in a headlock and that kind of thing. And one time we were at a bus stop not far from the Notts County ground in Nottingham, and he was just doing his thing and doing his poses and putting me in the headlock, and a gentleman crossed over the road, and I didn't know who it was at the time. It turned out that he was Max Angelus. And he said to me, "Do you realise, lads, that there's literally a wrestling school 2 minutes away from here, just up there?" Completely happy accident because I had no idea that there was a wrestling school in England, let alone Nottingham at the time. And obviously I couldn't take Ben because he didn't really understand the difference between like a work and a shoot.
Yeah.
Because he, you know, very, very autistic gentleman, lovely gentleman, but he wouldn't have been able to do the training. So I thought, well, if I don't do it now that I know it's there, then I'll regret it for the rest of my life because I always, like, it's clearly, like, something that I'm incredibly passionate about. So I thought I've got to just jump in and take the chance because it's fallen on my doorstep, and that's how it started at House of Pain.
Okay, and what year, when was this around?
Oh, right. I'm really bad with dates. I think 2013. Like, no. So I started training in 2012, I think, but I got a back injury at that job at work, and it put me off training for a little while. Because you know it affected. It was a pinched disc, so it affected everything that I did. I couldn't bend. I couldn't couldn't swivel. So it took me a while to build up the courage to go back to wrestling. But then I had a couple of mates at work who decided that they would quite like to try it as well. So I went back with them, and it was probably like November 2013 that I really like knuckled down and started trying to make something in wrestling.
Okay, and who was the trainers at that point?
Just Sticks. Sticks would have occasionally other people take his classes. So I had a class taken by Joseph Connors. I had a class taken by Alex Gracie. But mostly it was Sticks running all of the sessions. And there weren't that many sessions at the time. I think there were 2 a week. Whereas now Sticks has got a school that's open 7 days a week, running 2 sessions a day. So he will have other people in training sometimes. But at the moment, at that time he was a one-man band.
Yeah, and I would know Sticks from Southside, as you said, mentioned Max Angelus as well. That's where I mainly got to know Sticks. Incredible wrestler.
Fantastic wrestler. In terms of like working the WWE style, I cannot fathom for a second why he never got a look. He works those big man main events better than almost anybody else in the country, like him and Rampage, really, in my opinion. I think he's a hugely underrated wrestler and has done wonders for wrestling in this country. If you look at the people that have come through that school and, the people that have gone on to do other things in wrestling.
Okay, and when was your first match? Because you said not date-wise, but yeah, do you remember your first match?
October, at the end of October or the start of November 2014 against Lucas Archer.
Okay, and what was the nerves like for that?
So my background's in theatre and judo,
Okay,
so
yeah,
I've been used to having nerves
yeah,
for this kind of stuff. Like, because in theatre it's performance, and in judo it's competition. So it's almost like you put the two together and you get wrestling to an extent. Um, but it was the most nervous I'd been for anything ever in my life because it's the thing that I love the most, and you don't want to be bad at it. Like all I wanted, my goal when I has it gone off again?
No, no, no. I was looking at something. Don't worry.
The look on your face
You're
there.
fine. No.
The goal for me when I started wrestling was just to be told by wrestlers that I thought were good that I was good at wrestling.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted. So on my debut, I wanted people to go, "Oh, that was a really good match." That was my entire goal and all I wanted. And that happened. I was happy with that.
Okay. Was Lucas the same kind of? That's what I was looking up at the screen. Was Lucas the same kind of experience as you at that time? Like he quite new, or
Had one match. It was
nah?
sort of the show that we both debuted on was a debut day show, and practically it was the first one that House of Pain had ever done, and practically everybody on it, except for one or two people, were making their debut that day.
Okay.
But myself and Lucas had really good chemistry, and Styx had put us in the main event. So my debut match was a 12 to 14-minute main event with Lucas Archer in front of about 125 people.
Okay. Well, it's not bad. Bad way to start, is it? A main event.
No, the one thing you'll notice as we go through this is that I always end up getting thrown in the deep end. So
And we discussed this off on Twitter before that because a lot of stuff I go by is on Cage Match, and I'll look at people's Instagrams and stuff like that. Cage Match literally has missed half of your career, hasn't it?
I think I was looking at it just before we started this because I knew that you used it as a
Yeah.
reference because I've seen a couple of these before. I think there's probably a quarter of my matches on there, maybe slightly less than that. I think what it misses a lot, like Cage Match, I think is a brilliant resource, and I'm really happy that I've been on there for like there are some of my matches from 2014 are on there,
Yeah.
like so. It's great. It almost makes you feel like a professional wrestler when you look at Cage Match and you're on there, right? So I've got no issues with Cage Match at all, but because the people on there are using the resources that are available to them to figure out when the matches have been on, it means that lots and lots of matches will fall through the cracks. Like I must have had 50 matches, 60 matches on carnival shows that aren't listed on there. A
Yeah.
few matches at festivals that aren't listed on there. Lots of little shows that occasionally get a mention and then don't get a mention for 3 months and then will get a mention again are on there. So it's very, very hit and miss as to how much of the matches it captures, it's not at the end of the world, but I wish I'd kind of kept a record myself.
Yourself, yeah. It's because it relies on people reporting them for them. I've noticed.
Yeah,
Like bringing up Kamikaze, there was a dojo show which was behind closed doors, but it's
yeah,
on the engagement, so it has someone had to report
exactly,
it to them. So it
exactly.
requires people to actually write down the notes and then take it. So stuff will be missed. So if we go on average of Cage Match, you've wrestled 9 matches a year for the last 14 years.
I think anybody who looks at my Twitter account knows
No,
that's
yeah,
not
no, I
true.
don't 100%. But you got that Roman Reigns schedule according to Cage Match. So the first match that's on there, which is what we're going to bring up, is yourself and Dante Durden. I think it is how it's pronounced, against Danny Chase and Tommy Taylor. which was a December show, Christmas Chaos.
I think it was probably my second or third match. I think it was my second, and it was in a terrible, terrible little venue called the Victory Club in Beeston.
Yeah.
And I think there were like 25 people there, and they were miserable. They did not enjoy the show at all. However, Danny Chase, very experienced wrestler, even back then. He's retired now, but like in terms of Midlands, he's one of the best to come out of the Midlands. So I got the chance to get some feedback from him very early on. You know, so not all the memories are bad. It was for a second match, it was pretty miserable.
Yeah, it's odd that you get people that go to the show not to like where it's like a hive mentality that no one really wants to be there. It's a bit weird.
It is strange, but I do think like the venue itself had a part to play in that because it was dingy and they didn't.
And it's winter.
Some venues, It feels like they don't really want wrestling there. They've taken it because they know they'll get some money over the bar, but they're not really that bothered.
There's a lot of places like that.
It was one of them. It was one of them.
Yeah. And then you kind of via that, I can see that you kind of went out towards places like LCW, which I think is Elevation now, isn't it? And Hope Wrestling. How did you kind of get booked with between them?
So it all kind of started in the same way. The first chunk of my career was friends that I'd made through wrestling who thought that I was pretty talented, getting me spots on local shows. So the first outside booking that I got, which isn't mentioned on there, was at a company called United. In Stoke, there's two different Uniteds. This one's UWL, I think, United Wrestling Live. So it's not the slightly larger United that's I can't remember where that one's based. This one's in Stoke, and there's probably 120 fans there each and every week, on a monthly basis. So that's where I had my actual first outside booking. But all of the outside bookings came from guys like Joseph Connors saying, "Okay, this guy looks like he's going to be okay. Let's get him moving. Let's get him some outside bookings." A wrestler called Burchill from the Midlands got me a couple of early bookings as well. Just people that saw me and thought, I'd quite like to wrestle him at some point. Let's get him on the show.
Yeah, it's good because people do get stuck where they don't have like alternatives like that, and they'll just be within the same company for like 4 or 5 years before they branch out. Whereas it's good that you've kind of within a couple of years.
I got very lucky. With me, it was in less than 10 shows. I think it was like my fifth show that was an outside booking. Might have even been fourth. So really, really early. But I do think like there were certain people that have potential. I think a lot of people at the time saw that I had potential, that my mentality was right, that I was like putting a lot of energy into performing even then. Like, a lot of people don't find character until a little bit later in their career because they're green and they're trying to do the right things in the ring and not forget spots. Whereas I was straight away, because of the acting part of my background, like playing a role and growling and, I wasn't very good yet. But I was already trying hard, and I think people noticed that, and they try and pick up on it and push people.
Yeah, it's the kind of it's a bad expression, but it's the kind of fake it till you make it, isn't it? If you kind of like at least show that you're doing it, eventually it will just come along. And then you had a few matches, so there's people at Hope you fought Liam Lazarus.
Now known as Liam Slater.
Yeah, I thought the name was familiar.
Yeah. Incredible wrestler.
Yeah, he's alright.
He was brilliant at the time. But he was doing a much different gimmick. He was doing he came out to the Venga bus and was kind of doing a much more clappy kind of gimmick. Whereas I was doing a monster in a boiler suit, growling and biting the ropes and that kind of thing. And he'd had a few years' experience on me by that point. So, he wasn't the seasoned vet he is now, but he was certainly already higher on the pecking order than me. And we had a really good match. Like I say, we had a really good match. I recently saw it, and it's a terrible match. But at the time, I was really happy with it. It felt like more progression, because he said to me, for that many matches in, you're doing really well, mate. You need to keep doing this, keep doing that. And I came away from it, you know, not necessarily thinking I was the best thing about the shows or anything, but thinking, well, potentially could be one day. I just need to keep going, you know?
Yeah, it's nice when people like experienced people are giving you feedback, and some people might take it the opposite way, whereas as soon as they're getting feedback, they think they're not doing well.
I mean, I've spoken to Liam a couple of times since, and he remembers me. He doesn't remember the match too well, but he remembers me and he remembers it being okay. So I must have made a decent first impression.
It's very good. And then you, with HCW, the match I can see here is yourself and Felony versus the Archers, Georgie Archer and Lucas Archer.
Yeah, me and Lucas Archer. Lucas Archer went on to be in WCPW in the early days as a tag team with Alex Gracie. He excelled very, very quickly. He was very, very good. He was like the perfect foil for me. I could base for him and catch him, and he'd fly around. Felony is my original manager. The Living Dead girl, Felony. She had like a zombie gimmick, which was kind of Rob Zombie influenced, which is why I still use Rob Zombie music to this day.
Okay, and then we won't go into it just yet, but she was a part of the original Hellbound as well, wasn't she?
Yeah, a founding member of the original Hellbound.
Which we'll go in my order. But weirdly enough, like I love when I see these kind of matches. At Hope, sorry, where am I going? I'm missing completely. At House of Pain, sorry, you got to wrestle in the War Games, which is insane.
Yeah. And I mean, the people in that match as well, I think, are like Gabriel Kidd, and Joseph Connors, and,
You've got Bam Bam Barton as well.
Like these are Midlands, like people that really excelled out of the Midlands, especially obviously Joe and Gabe. They went on to be signed to New Japan and WWE respectively. But everybody on that, Zach Northern still wrestles occasionally in a tag team called Formidable. Everybody in that match was really, really good and much, much better than me at the time. But I was the last entrant because I was brought in by Felony to take out her old the person she used to manage, Barricade. Okay. So I was brought in as the Kane to his Undertaker.
Okay, and then weirdly enough, you two bonded.
We did, and it became, one of the highlights of my career when we loved wrestling each other, and we figured, what would be even better than wrestling each other is like beating everybody else up. On top of that, he is a big guy and he didn't want to be bumping around all the time and catching people. Yeah. So I was young and wanting to fly about and get smacked up. So I took all his bumps and he drove me to the venues. So
win-win, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. So match made in heaven.
And then there's according to Cage Match, the wording, you won a Royal Rumble for Elevation. That was the exact wording.
I don't remember that at all. There's quite a few that I don't remember, which is actually really nice because it means that I've to have had so many matches that I cannot remember some of them at all. I have no living memory of them. I couldn't have imagined that as a kid, No,
that's incredible. So, and it's nice to see some of the people that were in there. As you mentioned earlier, a lot of people that are still wrestling now. Like Antonio Gonzalez was in that Rumble, which to see him now.
Antonio wrestled early. We've been friends for a long time. Part of the reason I suggested him to Kumite was because I knew that he was going to be good because I'd wrestled him since he was a kid. So, yeah.
Yeah, he would have been at 16 about then, wouldn't he?
Yeah. In that match.
Yeah. He would have been around about 16, Antonio Gonzalez there, wouldn't he, thinking about it? 2015.
And I mean, 16. Also in that match, you've got some of the Rumbles here. This one's got Chris Tyler and Dan Maloney in it.
Yeah, you got the Hunters. Been Tyler Bates in one of them. It's
Tyler Bates. Yeah.
Who's who?
I was around early doors. I was around lots of big names.
Yeah. And then we might as well go into it. So how was the format? How did Hellbound the group come together?
This one's quite an interesting one, actually. So whilst I am kind of a founding member of Hellbound, actually the group started a month before I joined them, up in Alpha Omega Wrestling, which
Yeah.
is now Odyssey. Odyssey Pro Wrestling, which is in Morecambe, hotbed for UK wrestling, brilliant place to wrestle. I was supposed to be going up to those shows to tag with Paul Malin as the Winter Warriors, but Paul Malin pulled out of the show at the last minute because of I think family issues. So I was kind of left with no spot on the show, and the booker suggested that they just put me as part of Hellbound instead. So I was slotted into that group almost by accident, and this is you'll find me saying this a hell of a lot. There's lots of happy accidents of being in the right place in pro wrestling. You've got to, but that's the thing. It's like professional football, you know. If you're not in the box, you don't score.
Yeah,
I was trying to get to all these places, trying to get my face out there, even though I was, 2 years in and very green and doing my best. And because I was putting in the effort and being in all these places, then opportunities started to fall on my doorstep. And now you see Hellbound starting up in 2016, 2017, and I'm still doing that today. That's still in my stable. So
it's weird how stuff it happens. A lot of wrestlers, a lot in these interviews, just mention like a happy accident. It's probably one of the biggest things that's happened to them. Like Malcolm Monroe, the previous interview that's up, he went, I was supposed to be in a tag team match. The guy couldn't turn up and I ended up winning a tournament instead. And it's like,
exactly.
So with Hellbound, how many people are still wrestling at the moment within Hellbound?
So within the original Hellbound, it's only Andre Decker who's still wrestling. And he's really good. We've got a lot of time for Andre Decker. Haven't really crossed paths with him since because Morecambe's a hell of a long way away.
Yeah.
From Nottingham. I mean, it's like a 4.5 hour drive. It's the only place that I've ever been to from the Midlands and gone, how is it that far away? How can that be possible? But yeah, he's the only person still active. Felony retired probably about 6 years ago, and Barricade retired during lockdown. He decided that his body was too beat up and he was quite enjoying it not hurting, so he just decided not to come back. So yeah, just me and Andre Decker from the originals.
Okay, and then in AOW you mentioned here that you won the tag team titles. Was that kind of like a Freebird team at that point? Yeah, I noticed there was
like I didn't even win those titles. I held them, I defended them, but I didn't actually win them.
Yeah, but you defended them, so therefore you have held them.
I'll take it.
So how long did Hellbound as a group hold that?
4 months, I think. We were quite dominant, but the whole point of us was that we were going to be fall guys for a big baby face. So we, had a burst and then lost them quite quick, I think.
Yeah, there was a weird match that was on here, which you might have to explain to me. It was yourself versus Andre Decker versus Barricade for the tag team titles.
Let's have a look. Let me see if I can find
that. 2nd of December 2017.
2nd of the... Oh, dear me, that's...
Yeah, you're a triple threat for the tag team titles between yourselves.
Yeah, so there was an angle where Andre Decker got frustrated with Barricade after a match and hit him in the back of the head with a bottle that shattered. And there was like a whole, like, who's responsible for us losing the titles, that kind of scenario. And we ended up just having a mass brawl, which, nobody was over, but the fans enjoyed it because we were just all beating each other up.
Yeah, but the crap, yeah.
So yeah, it was just one of those weird little matches that you sometimes get thrown at you where you're like, well, what am I going to do with this? But actually, you end up having quite a lot of fun doing it.
It just seems, I was just looking at it, I was going, they're all 3 members of Hellbound. It's like, they're all tag team champions. It's the weirdest thing I've seen. And
It was
then you
hard.
move into 2018 and you start sprouting around a bit more. Obviously, you said like Cage Match hasn't got half your matches, so you probably were flying at this point anyway. But your places like UWL that you've mentioned already, Paradox, DOA,
Yeah.
and you like Hellbound was sprouting around at that point. But you were getting to fight people like Gabriel Kidd against and Saxon Huxley, who was incredible.
Oh yeah, those tag team matches with Saxon and Gabriel Kidd are some of my favourite matches. We did two, and they were just incredibly physical. They were what you'd imagine, like me and Barricade, big nasty mean heels, and Sax and Gabe can clearly throw with the best of
Yeah,
them.
they like it. Yeah,
The match is exactly what you're imagining in your head.
just
There were
absolute
lots of
brutality.
yeah.
Not one body slam, just like.
But again, it's down to I was very fortunate to have trained and become friends with Gabe through House of Pain, and he's got a lot of trust and faith in me as a mate and as a wrestler. And you know, if there was opportunities to wrestle me, I'd often say I'll wrestle Kev, and it was great because it meant that I got to wrestle guys like Sax, and I've learnt from some of the absolute best in the industry, and I'm very grateful to call guys like Sax and Gabe friends and see what they're doing at the moment in Japan, which is some mind-blowing stuff, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's good. It's taken advantage of that as well. Like, it's not like you've gone, oh, they've got me in and I've done nothing with it. You took advantage of like their friendship, and then it's like you blossom in these places and they keep making you back.
Wrestling very much is about who you know. It always is. It's about what connections you've made, what contacts you've made. Are you a nice person? Does this person want to work with you? Will they want to work with you again? If you make good bonds with lots of people, then you'll get much further in wrestling than if you're offish and weird and people don't really know if they want you around.
Yeah, you could be one of the technically one of the best wrestlers, but if you're a massive dickhead, you know, it's like they may not want to book you. And the match I want to bring up here, you had a last man standing match with Johnny Concrete.
Yes, I did. For those that don't know, Johnny Concrete is my best mate in real life. He's the guy that, you know, when I said some friends from work had said that they wanted to start wrestling and they kind of brought me back into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was one of those. Johnny was one of those people. And he was about 25, 26 stone at the time, heavy drinking, like beer swilling, and somehow quite athletic and able to do things like can hit a beautiful leg drop. And it's like, so I was incredibly fortunate that United kind of gave me leeway to practice because all I wanted to do was practice being a hardcore wrestler. And United would not only put me against friends, but they would put me in those kind of situations. So that match with Johnny Concrete is kind of like a practice run in my head for everything that I started doing afterwards. And there's a lot of United matches missing from that list that are also like hardcore matches or like that was kind of where I practiced the formula and got it right for the career as it went on to be. I also think in that match, Johnny Concrete popped a champagne cork up my backside, which was, nice.
That's incredible. Point I saw you won the UWL championships. You had a championship match at that point, where it was a triple threat with yourself versus Dave Del Vincio. I'm going to go Vicio. I'm going to go with and Paul Malin.
Yeah, I held that title a few times. I think I held that title 4 times, so it kind of gives you an idea of how much is missing. I don't remember that match specifically, but I can talk about wrestling Paul Malin because it would have been great to have been a tag team with him, especially like somewhere as hot as Morecambe, because I'd have learned a hell of a lot from him. He's another one of those Midland stalwarts who's wrestled everybody. I mean, I've watched him wrestle Badass Billy Gunn. I've watched him wrestle, I think he wrestled Tatanka. You know, I've seen him wrestle some of the, if they've been at WrestleMania, there's a good chance Paul Malin's wrestled them when they got a bit older. He knows his stuff, and he runs he runs a brilliant school out of Derby now.
Yeah.
Called Aspire, which has got like guys like Rourke and a lot of the quite a few of the Kumite guys coming through. So whenever I got to wrestle Paul Malin, that was always a very, very easy night. Very little planning in terms of what was going to happen in the match, because he's one of those guys that could just get in and work. And like, my style is quite easy to work around. You're going to bump and feed a little bit, that kind of thing, you know. So I very much doubt we planned too much for that match. We probably just went out there and winged quite a lot of it.
Yeah, because I remember Paul Malin. So outside of Kamikaze, when I first got interested in the independent side of wrestling, Paul Malin's probably the first person I saw out like can remember outside of Kamikaze. His team with the Joseph Connors, the Predators, and then the Righteous Army
Tag team.
were probably one of my highlights of Southside. Himself and the Righteous Army were a great gimmick at the time. But yeah, Paul Malin's just he's when you see him, he's just entertaining. Like every match he has, he knows what to do depending on what the crowd is.
Great for listening to the crowd. Like, it can change on a dime because he listens, he takes in what they're enjoying, and he will play into that. It's like a true British style wrestler. Really good.
That's the trouble with some kind of planning. Like, some people stick to the plan too much, and it could be they'll be booed out the arena, but they're still trying to get cheered. Like, it's like, what, you need to accept what's happening. So we break up into the interview at this point where we discuss more outside of wrestling, because obviously the pandemic happened, that thing that nearly ruined everything for years. A lot of Americans still got to wrestle during that, but obviously in the UK we had to kind of shut down. So the last match you had prior to the pandemic, according to this, it probably isn't it. It was a 4-on-3 handicap match, which was Hellbound and Xander Zulu versus the.
That was the very last match before.
It was.
I think.
Yeah, I think
it was.
What was your knowledge of the pandemic at that point before that was you knew that you'd have to stop for a bit?
I don't think anybody, as I recall, I don't really think anybody knew how it was going to affect us and what was coming. In fact, I know I can't have, because it's still affecting me now. Like, the pandemic is the reason I found out I had like attention deficit. So it definitely affected me in a big way. I don't think I could have known, and I think a huge part of the reason it affected me was because I didn't have an outlet. I didn't have wrestling. Wrestling for me is a great release of frustration, and when you've got ADHD, it can be hard to sit still.
Yeah.
When you've got wrestling, you never need to sit still. So for me, it's a great place to pour a lot of the excess energy that I've got into. And when that was taken away from me, I essentially went into meltdown. Lots of drinking, too much drinking, bottles of whiskey a day kind of drinking. My my ring shape's never fully recovered. I still haven't got into the kind of shape I was in before lockdown. You know, it had a mammoth effect on my life, in terms of personal life and in terms of wrestling.
Yeah, it was tougher. Obviously, you said, like, especially if you weren't aware of it, and then suddenly it happening and you've got nothing to do.
But thank God for Styx, because whenever there was like a break, you know, like before the first and second lockdown, and then before the second and third lockdown, whenever he had an opportunity, he opened up the school, he got cameras in there, and he did House of Pain tapings, and he would record. In 3 days, he would record like 8 weeks worth of tapings, so that people had stuff to watch throughout the pandemic. And it meant that between those months where I wasn't able to wrestle, I had like a chunk of 3 or 4 matches. They weren't in front of an audience.
Yeah.
They were in front of a camera, but I got to wrestle. So thank the Lord for Styx for being like quite quick-witted and observant and following the rules incredibly carefully.
Safe, still,
Like he followed, you know, he had full, like, the paperwork that we had to sign was like 30 pages long. He followed the rules perfectly. Nobody could have complained about it, but he made it happen because it was a sports event and you were allowed to do those at the time. So we had very short tapings and got it done.
Yeah, and it helps a lot of people out. Yeah, you said it helps yourself out, but it also helps people that are kind of bored and they haven't got anything because wrestling's been ruined in the UK.
Exactly. Loads of people in Nottingham rely on those shows. They're £5. you know, and they're on people's doorstep. And not a lot of people, not everybody has money in this day and age.
Yeah.
There's a cost of living crisis. The prices of everything is going up. The rents are going up. Like, people need local family entertainment at cheap prices, and that's what House of Pain delivers in Nottingham. And when they didn't have that, Styx still tried to give them something by giving them a weekly taping.
That's incredible. So yeah, as I said, we going to go outside of the wrestling during this period. So the first question we normally ask is, what kind of music you into? Or
very dangerous question with me. This could be hours long. Like, I already talk way too much. I've got a Instagram page called Daily Discographies, where I just put loads and loads of things put loads of bands into a wheel and spin it, and then just do their whole discography in reviews. So my taste is hugely varied.
I'm following that straight away. I remember we followed it on the HCW channel, but I haven't followed it on my actual Instagram, so it's straight up there. What have you enjoyed recently then, from what you've listened to?
So, bear with me 1 second.
No worries.
So, I've been listening to...
Yeah, no, it is very valid. I'm seeing an ABBA ranking here. That's incredible.
I'll tell you what as well, that ABBA ranking was really, really surprisingly good. Like, I was not expecting to enjoy ABBA anywhere near as much as I did. I thought it was going to be a couple of singles and lots of gash on every album.
The things you know, and then
gems.
Yeah.
But the band that I'm listening to at the moment for the page is Diablo Symphony Orchestra, I believe. And that's what they call Diablo Swing Orchestra.
Yeah.
And they're like a Danish kind of heavy metal swing act. It's a complete nonsense. The music is fantastic, but it takes some listening to. You blows your mind at first.
Yeah, because I was like this with because I was at I worked at HMV for years. You just get used to listening to random stuff eventually. You just go, oh, that's because you're putting a CD out and go, that looks alright. And then you listen to it and you're like, yeah, it wasn't. Like people.
The band are called Diablo Swing Orchestra, and they're from Sweden. And I would advise people to check them out. They're very, very different.
And you should have reviewed the 5th album by the time this goes out, so you'll have the full opinion. I'm assuming this is going to be the most difficult question of your life. Who is your favourite band artist?
So, I know you hate this as well, because I know you get thrashed on this every single time.
Yeah.
Because people always pick like popular bands and you go for Avril Lavigne.
Popular artist?
That's true. I think my favourite band of all time, the band that I remember finding, it was very similar to how I found wrestling. It was a cassette tape in my mum's box, and it was the Beatles. And the first song I ever listened to that I remember listening to over and over again was I'll Follow the Sun.
Oh, no.
But I can't say the Beatles, because everybody just thinks you're copping out if you say your favourite band is the Beatles. So I don't know. Like, it probably is the Beatles, if I'm being completely honest with myself. But I like so much music. Like, David Bowie would be another one that's incredibly high on my list.
Yeah, that's good. And then do you watch many films at all, or?
Yeah, I used to watch a lot more films than I do now, because like I say, I used to deal with my ADHD a lot better before lockdown. Now, sitting through a couple of hours, it can be a bit of a chore for me. Like, no, I'm a huge fan of like gangster films.
Yeah.
And you know what? Again, it's super, super varied. Like, a lot of psychological thrillers. I'm a great fan of like 80s horror and like the Evil Dead franchise and those kind of films. Yeah, I've got a pretty varied taste in most media, I'd say.
Okay, and you say gangster film, is that like gangster as in like Goodfellas gangster, or is that gangster as in Danny
Yeah,
Dyer's rolling
yeah,
up?
yeah. Like Scorsese type
Okay.
films, you know, those casino style films, but also like more up to date modern ones. Like my favorite film is probably Dead Man's Shoes, which is a British film,
I
which
may
is
watch that even though, yeah.
kind of a little bit gangstery, but is a revenge film, really. That I would, if nothing, if you don't take anything else away from this podcast, I would strongly recommend people search out Dead Man's Shoes and watch that. It is probably my favorite film of all time.
I might whack that on my playlist. And then what are your kind of your other hobbies?
So me and my brother do a lot of festivals, or we used to a lot more, but like wrestling bookings have swallowed that up a little bit. Um, but like live music was my main other hobby other than wrestling. I love battle rap. I'm a huge battle rap fan.
Yeah, I've
Anybody who
noticed, yeah.
follows me on Twitter will know that I mention it quite a lot. I think it's the closest thing to professional wrestling that you'll get that isn't professional wrestling. Um, uh, Other than that, like I'm quite simple. I love just standard things like sports and going for walks. But mostly my life revolves around wrestling. That's what the vast majority of my focus is on. If we're being honest,
Ah, makes sense. What sports you into, except for wrestling?
martial arts. My dad used to be a pro boxer and's got like 7 different belts in multiple martial arts. So I was
Jesus.
brought up in a very martial arts based household. I've got a black belt in judo and, used to do quite a bit of boxing myself. So any sports that have like physical contact, like MMA or kickboxing, anything along those lines, I can get lost in for days. The thing that I found in the past decade that I've fallen in love with and I never expected to because I loathed it as a kid is football. And I've
Okay.
realised it's insanely dramatic. It's almost as dramatic as wrestling. Like, I don't watch football for the football. I watch football for the drama. I
Yeah,
watch
it's if you're
football for the
invested, isn't
managers
it?
getting
Yeah.
sacked, the teams doing shit, and it was and Leicester City winning on a whim when nobody expected them to. I think that that's probably other than wrestling, that's probably the thing that I'll watch in the background with if I'm just doing something around the house.
Yeah, it's about being invested. Like, if you're not, like, if you're watching it just to the point of watching it, you're not invested, you might not. Whereas if you're invested in a team and then they dramatically something happens, it's the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so a few questions we get asked, which I'm going to throw out to you. So firstly, this is one that we're asking every show. A movie of your life, who would play you?
Oh man, alive. Uh, I honestly don't know. That's a really tough question. Uh, I'm such a weird role to play, though, aren't I? Like, I
Yeah, you're
don't
not like
like
the simplest
it's.
role.
Yeah, it would take a lot for somebody to like. I can't really think of anybody who would like off the top of my head. I can't think of anybody that's particularly like me. So it's a tough one. Can you think of anybody who would play me?
I think someone that would play you if they could get his what's his name out of This Is England, Woody. I feel like Woody could give you a go. I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah. There's probably some kind of like some actors from shows like like your Top Boys and that kind of thing where there'll be one or two that could probably play me, big brash fat fellas. But I don't think I don't think it's the
you're going to say
easiest role to
Sully
play.
then. That's what I think that might be a bit of a step far. There's a couple of questions we're going to involve into the deathmatch side of it a bit later on. What's the someone's asked a question which I've not listed their name down, so I do apologise. What's your kind of best kind of day off? Like where you're not at work, what would be your ideal day off kind of thing?
Um, Long walk with the dogs for a couple of hours. Evening playing Baldur's Gate 3 with my wife. Um, maybe a meal out somewhere, preferably somewhere quite scenic. It's like maybe take a pack up out with us, go for a hike, sit on a field like overlooking the countryside, come home, music on the way there, music on the way back, and then play Baldur's Gate or watch, whatever we've got caught up in at the moment, Succession or Dragon Ball or whatever until bedtime. Maybe a cheeky smoke and a little drink to go with it.
You mentioned Baldur's Gate. Are you a D&D fan then, are you?
So D&D was always too maths based for me, same as Warhammer. I tried to avoid it because like I struggle when it comes to numbers, like rolling and measuring and all that. It starts to feel like work to me.
Yeah.
A little bit. So not necessarily, but I've always been a role playing game fan, like online. I used to love like Japanese role playing games when I was younger, especially turn based ones. And I did really enjoy the first couple of Baldur's Gate games when they came out. Having played Baldur's Gate 3 now, though, I think I would be more likely to go and play the tabletop game, because I've really enjoyed the experience, and I think I understand the tabletop game a little bit better now and how it could be really interesting. So no, but not something that I wouldn't look into. Maybe I've changed my mind on it a little bit.
Yeah, it's because I started watching a lot of YouTube channels, like No Roads Barred and then Chaotic Neutral, and they've got me into D&D. I've never played it myself, but I've been interested in it because of it. Because it just looks fun.
It does look fun.
We will get back to what we're here for, though, so a bit of wrestling. Do you remember your first match back?
I do. It was against Riley Nova at a company that was running in WAW's venue. And I was really, really nervous, actually, because I was worried that I would have no stamina and no ring shape whatsoever, because we hadn't really had the chance to train. Like the world had opened up, and a week later, somebody was like, "Right, we're putting on a show. Do you want to go?" And there's no way that I was going to say no.
Yeah.
I'd been waiting for so long. So I was really worried that I was going to get there and be out of shape and disgusting, and I was. So not the best. It probably wasn't the best comeback match, but like you'd be surprised at how quick ring shape leaves you if you're not in the ring on a regular basis.
Yeah,
like I'm a 19 / almost 20 stone guy, so I've already got less of a tank than some other people would have. But I think anybody who's seen me wrestle knows I can go. Like for a big lad, I can go, and I can go for a while. But when you haven't been in the ring like on a consistent basis, it zaps you. It does zap you.
Yeah, nothing can prepare you for ring cardio except being in the ring, can it? It's not something you can just run on a treadmill and be fine.
You did a lot of training back in the day, didn't you? And there's nothing as exhausting except for maybe boxing drills. Like they can be really, really hard as well. But I haven't experienced anything as exhausting as like ring. You've got to be vocal, you've got to be bumping and feeding. Like there's so many things going on that you can't regulate your breathing in the same way that you would in usual sports. So
yeah, because it's mental as well. Yeah, because you've got to think about what you're doing at the same time of making sure you're not dying. And then we'll start getting into it now. Where did the deathmatch Alton come from?
Deathmatch Alton was always kind of there. I think Deathmatch Alton was what I wanted to be. There just wasn't an opportunity. Like Rise was running shows for a few years doing death matches, but I didn't know anybody at Rise. And Danny O'Doherty's like he doesn't respond to some of the guys he's got on his shows, so he's not going to respond to me. So there was just no in. There was no in for me to do death match. So I'd done all these years of practicing doing hardcore wrestling, but didn't think I was ever really going to get to do it. But I love death matches. I think they're a very, very underutilized and under-respected form of wrestling. I've always loved it. Started with Foley and Funk, and it escalated from there. And if the opportunity was there, I was always going to take it.
Yeah, and you've ran with it. To be honest. So when did because was Kumite the first place you got to do deathmatch wrestling at?
Yep, Malachi managed me at the Hope shows back in the day. He managed me in a match against T-Bone He managed me in a couple of matches, but the first one was against T-Bone, and it was possibly my worst match of all time. Matt was dreadful in it. He was terrible. He had 3 spots to do, and he fucked up 4 of them. So, like, and people say, well, how did that happen? Well, he also fucked up a spot that he wasn't supposed to be in by
just
jumping
there.
the gun and trying to do that soon. So he had a awful night at the office, and I think he'd had a couple too many as well at that point because his nerves were pretty bad. And T-Bone was turning up 10 minutes before the match, and we were going on first.
Oh, really?
So we didn't have, yeah. And it was Matt's first time managing me. I think it was like his 3rd time managing ever. So he was thrown in the deep end. It wasn't his fault, really. But it was a nightmare. But he knew me from then, and we got on well, and we talked occasionally. He went to Visage when he thought of doing the Kumite thing and said, do you want to do some death matches? I think your aesthetic would be perfect for it. And Visage said, I definitely don't ever want to do any death matches.
That's what I thought.
But I know a guy who does. And that's how it started.
Okay. And then when did you find out you were going to start? Like, was that like a couple of months prior to the show happening?
Matt messaged me and said, we've got this plan for when wrestling's back up. We're going to be running some no-ring shows. I asked Visage, well, they said no. Do you want to be part of them? And I said yes immediately. So I always said that it would take a certain type of person to get me to do a death match, even though I really wanted to do them, because I didn't want to be doing them in small rooms for 20 fans and cutting myself open. Like, I wanted them to be of a certain standard.
Yeah.
So you would go to it and you would know that it's a wrestling show, you know? For all of Kumite's insanity and looseness, it's still a wrestling show with wrestlers on it. And I'd always said that if I was going to do it, I had to do it properly with people that I trusted. And that person happened to be Malachi. He'd been working at Rise. He'd been around Deathmatch. I already knew him. I knew I could trust him because he loved Deathmatches in the same way that I did to do it properly. So when he approached me, it was never in doubt.
Okay, and then obviously that first match, there's not too bad people to be in the match with Danny Darko and Big Fucking Joe for the Death Wolf Championship, so straight away you're in the title scene.
I've told this story before, but it bears retelling. My first death match ever was a no-ring death match against 2 of the Deathmatch Outlaws. Joe had double booked himself. He also had a death match that night at TNT in Liverpool, which is a 2-hour drive from Derby. They put him on the other show first. He had his death match and then drove to Derby with blood spraying out of his knee so badly that his sock went bright red before he got to the venue. He nearly passed out on his way to the venue through blood loss, right? He turned up 10 minutes before the match. I had no time to even... I barely got to say hello to Joe before we went out there. So you imagine your first ever death match, no ring, against 2 people that are very well versed in them, and you've planned one spot, how to finish the match, and a little something at the beginning, and the rest of that 20 minutes is going to be like, who the fuck knows? Remember what I said about being thrown in at the deep end?
Yeah, it doesn't sound the greatest.
I'm quite happy with that match. Like, I watch it back and it is flawed. It's a flawed match. But the reason it's flawed is because of the circumstances. For us to have pulled anything out of the bag at all, given the circumstances, and for it to have been enjoyable enough for them to have built a company out of it since, I'm quite proud of it.
No, definitely. It's as good as it ever been. That's why we're releasing this video this week, because I'll be there Sunday. Then you move into, like, straight away, you know, we calm it down a bit. So you go from a no-ring death match to a no-ring coffin match with Tomby, who, you know, Tomby's very sane.
Yeah, and that match was possibly even crazier than the first, because we were supposed to have a big venue, and the big venue got told by the police that if they put us on, then they would take their liquor license off them. So we ended up on the day of, I think it literally happened like the day of or the day before the event, they found a tiny little back room in a tiny little pub in Derby. And they were like, I don't even know if it's legal to put it. It wasn't legal to put it on in there, but we're putting a match on in here. So there was probably 4 foot of space for us to wrestle in.
Yeah, it's a small play.
It's tiny. So me and Tomby looked at each other before the match and we said, well, what are we going to do? Not much choice, is there? We're just going to have to clatter each other as hard as we can for 20 minutes. Because people are that far away. Like, they're literally like breathing distance away. I could feel their breath on the back of my neck, you know? Like, so if we're not hitting each other, they're going to know we're not hitting each other. So we did a 15-minute match of laying every single strike in, hitting each other as hard as we fucking could, because we had no choice. So that match turned out to be even more mental than the first one.
And then just continue. You ended up was this a debut for TNT at Dead or Alive?
Yeah, that was the debut.
Yeah, and you fought Clint Margera, who's probably one of the OGs of the deathmatch scene UK, was.
That was a debut. Another crazy moment of like what happened was Charlie Evans and Alex Colon had both pulled out of the show, the DOA tournament the night before, DOA 3. Alex Colon couldn't get over for travel reasons, and I think Charlie Evans, I can't remember what the reason was, but it was something personal. So they'd lost the two like biggest stars from the show. And at this point, I'd had 2 death matches. And there's no way that I can replace Alex Colon or Charlie Evans after 2 death matches. And yet, I got the call that night because Jay Apter had heard from a couple of people that I could go. And he said, well, I need somebody to fill in very last minute. Are you able to do it? And I had to drop a shift at work and find somebody I'd never met before to drive me down there so that I could appear on that show with 24 hours notice.
Yeah, and I said, fact racing someone, at least it was someone like Clint Margera.
Absolutely loved it. Yeah. Absolutely loved it. Clint was actually the first deathmatch wrestler I knew of from the UK, because when I was watching CZW, he'd flitted over there in bits and pieces. So I had him on a couple of DVDs. At least one DVD. Like I was aware of Clint and thought he was really good. So when that was announced, it was like, okay, that's 3 crazy matches in a row to start off with. I thought, like, this is the best jump off point that I could have possibly had. Like 3 of the most experienced guys doing it, and Tomby, who loves it as much as I do. Like, I mean, anybody can see that me and Tomby are incredibly passionate about deathmatch wrestling. So getting to wrestle him early was great. And it was just like the first 3 matches that I had set me up for the rest of my career, I think.
Yeah, you haven't really looked back. During this time, you were debuting places, I believe, like Future as well. So it wasn't all just deathmatch. You weren't just being thrown in the deathmatch scene and left there. You got to fight David Grant, who appears a few times in Kumite.
Yeah, me and David get on really well. I think that was actually. I hadn't been at Future. It's run by Kingsley, who's a really good friend of mine. Obviously, we wrestled a lot last year. You saw us like.
Yeah, you did it right.
But beyond that, we're good friends. And it had just been a case of like waiting for a moment for me to get involved. And it just felt like it was the right. He wanted me to come in and bring some experience because he has a lot of. Future is what it says on the label. There's a lot of guys that are like really strong in the Midlands that are coming up, and I think Kingsley needed a couple of guys that have been around a little bit by that period, that had done a fair amount and could help the guys that were coming up. And he saw me as one of those guys. And David Grant is a guy that's on the rise, just needs a little bit more experience, a little bit more, like time in the ring and reps, and big guy versus big guy. Who doesn't want to see 2 giant blokes slapping the piss out of each other?
Yeah, and the one thing I'll remember David Grant for forever is hot sauce in someone's eye. That's the only thing I'll ever remember from David Grant.
David Grant. When it comes to future, I'm looking for a fourth Hellbound member at the moment, and David Grant is good friends with one of the Hellbound members, Joey. Well, he's not good friends with him; they don't like each other at all, but they're tag team partners. Um, and there's 4 skulls on the Hellbound T-shirt, and there's only 3 members at the moment. So I might be trying to persuade him to, fill those 4th boots, because I think, I need a drinking partner. You got Harley doesn't drink too much, and Joey isn't even legally allowed to drink yet, so it'll have to be David.
Yeah, I'm glad you were doing this for the right reasons. And then Hellbound, obviously he's a massive thing at the moment. Harley Harris, which I rave about every show I see her on.
Love Harley, love Harley. She was when Felony decided to step back. I was like, we still need a woman in Hellbound. We need a strong, fierce female, and I thought Harley was the perfect person for it. And hardcore Harley Harris has been a revelation. Like, for the first few years of her career, I think she would admit, like, she wasn't particularly confident. She had sticky feet. A couple of those little problems you get in the early days. She has come on in leaps and bounds over the past few years. She is to the point where I think she's one of the best female wrestlers in the country.
Oh, I agree, yeah.
Holding 5 belts, 4 now, but holding 5 belts a couple of weeks ago would suggest that that's probably true, right?
Yeah, and she's very different to other female wrestlers because she looks like she'll kick your face in. That's all I like.
Yeah.
And then
we don't do any damsel in distress spots in Hellbound. We don't do the woman's in peril, because she's not. She can handle herself. As simple as that.
No, 100%. Like, as I said, she's probably my favourite female wrestler in the UK right now. And we're probably overstepping because I want to speak about Kingsley a bit more. But like your match with Kingsley, who made Kingsley bleed, not Alton Thorne.
No, that was Harley. Yeah, and fair play to her.
And then we go back to the Kumite side of it. So you fought Antonio, and then you went on to Michael Caden, which I believe was my first ever Kumite show. Would have been the Michael Caden. Was that the glass spot at the end? Was that B.A. Rose? That would have been B.A. Rose, thinking about it.
No, B.A. Rose. You're talking
about
that
B.A. Rose. That would have been April, yeah. So no, yeah, ignore me.
Yeah, Caden had glass as well. So,
yeah. So them 2 matches, then we move into, the B.A. Rose match would have been the first Kumite show I was at. Where you kind of hooked me at that point. Absolutely,
I was really happy with that match with BA. Yeah. Me and BA knew that we'd have a good match. We've got a similar mindset, a similar style. So we'd kind of been asking various places if they'd put that match on. And we just knew, when you know, we just knew that we'd have that kind of chemistry and it'd feel right, and we were right. I think we both went home really happy with that match that day. The finish, let's be completely upfront, very difficult. In a death match, it's hugely difficult to do a no finish, because how are you supposed to keep these people down? Like all the stuff we put ourselves through, and then we're supposed to both lay down. So the end of that match was designed to make people believe that we had to stay down, because
Well, I did. We discussed it after. I thought you genuinely were.
I think it worked, but yeah, that was the only issue that I remember having with that match, was that we were asked to keep both of us strong and not have a finish at the end, and we were like, how do we do this in a match where we're both gonna beat the hell out of each other the whole time? So the glass spot at the end was for that reason.
And then with the Kumite side of it, we'll move on to a few things prior to your matches with Kingsley. So you entered the Rise Deathmatch Rumble at that point that year as well in May, and you just started being hardcore everywhere. No, be honest.
Yeah, even on the family shows. Yeah. I've taken Nettles to family shows at this point. I've been asked to take Nettles to family shows. So this is where I think my career turned. The Kumite stuff started to really get some traction, like lots of views online, lots of people talking about it, including, wrestlers from other country talking about Kumite regularly. So it was starting to feel like a thing. And I think my stock started rising because I'm so tied in with Kumite. Like, people think Kumite, I'm one of the first people they think of.
Yeah.
So when Kumite's stock started rising, my stock went up with it. And it meant that I was starting to be able to do the type of wrestling that I love on a permanent basis at big places all over the country. So places like South Pro started taking a chance on me doing that. Rise started booking me to do that. And it's gone on from there. But no, so the second year of Kumite, the matches with BA and Antonio, I think that's where my career really started to take off.
And then you wrestle with your company, which I haven't got chance to get down to. We're quite local to me. Is OTC? How's that come about?
The gentleman that runs it had booked lots of people that I'm friends with. So Harley was on the poster, Brad Matthews was on the poster, Act 2 were on the poster. So as soon as I saw those people on the poster, I thought, that's somewhere I could potentially work then, because I want to be around people I like.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And then I found out through a source that he was a fan of hardcore wrestling, was going to have a hardcore title on his shows. And from there, it was like, okay, right, we need to have a conversation there.
Yeah.
I've done a couple of matches for the company so far. They're only just starting out, they're finding their feet. They're having some venue issues at the moment, which is not unusual to anybody starting out a wrestling company. But I really enjoyed both of the shows I've done for them so far, and I hope he continues to grow what he's doing.
Yeah, and I've heard good things from him, like the card-wise. People like you got Lucy Lee, Big Man Vesker, and people on the Act 2, he's booking the right people.
Yeah, there's lots of talent. Lots of guys that are coming through as well that are, at places like Infamous. Have quite a few of their guys are on those shows, and they've got a lot of good guys coming through. So hopefully it will continue to expand.
And we'll go on to a match which I was very invested in. You had a match with Gary J.
I did, yeah.
Which was insane because it wasn't a death match, and it might well have been.
Yeah, I think we had, our intention was to have as extreme a match as anybody else on the card, without touching weapons, and there's only one way that myself and Gary J are going to do that. It's by pelting each other really fucking hard over and over again. The chops that I took that day practically blistered my chest. I must have took 12 Gary J chops. No human being should take 12 Gary J chops.
No, you should not. No human being should take one. Should be outlawed.
Hugely important match to me, not just because I was already a Gary J fan. Had been a Gary J fan for a while. I didn't really remember the Barnow stuff, but I'd seen him start doing ICW matches.
Yeah.
So for a couple of years, he'd been the guy that was the really hard guy who quite slim but just refused to say die. That's kind of how I saw him. So when I was told that he was coming over here and they wanted somebody to have a fight with him, immediately I was like, I would have rather had that match on that show than a death match on that show, because it meant a lot to me. It was my first time wrestling an import, and myself and Gary got a lot of respect for each other from that day forward. We still message each other, we still talk. He's coming back over next year. He might be staying at mine again for a night so that he can do something in the Midlands. Yeah, brilliant day. One of my proudest moments in wrestling, I would say. Not a long match because we went hell for leather.
Well, you wouldn't expect it, but yeah, you kind of kicked the shit out of the general essence of it.
Yeah. I was really happy with it.
And before we go, Gary J is probably one of the most humble people I've ever spoke to as well. When we interviewed him on the channel, I said, because I was like, I've got Gary J on somehow, and I thanked him, and he went, no, thank you. I didn't expect anyone to know me across the UK. And I went, What do you mean? You're Gary J?
He really is that humble.
Yeah.
He's that humble all the time.
Such a nice guy. So we'll go on to a main thing that everyone looks forward in the Kumite. Your rivalry with Kingsley. Bit bloody.
Yeah, like, Kingsley doesn't do things by halves.
No.
We started it off with him doing a match with Haley, which he called me out afterwards because we'd already been doing a bit of a series around the country fighting each other.
Mm-hmm.
So he called me out there, and I chased him off because he's a coward. And then on the next show, we did a tag team match, and he got to pick his partner, and he chose Gallus, who is just a giant.
Yeah, he's a pretty big man.
Slab of a man, isn't he?
Yeah.
So, like, they tied me up in the ropes, fed me nettles, and beat up my tag team partner and threatened to hit her with glass. And my thing was very much like, if you're a deathmatch wrestler and you've said you're going to be a deathmatch wrestler, it's absolutely fine. But you can't just be hitting anybody with glass, right?
Yeah.
So Kingsley picked up the glass. Kingsley swung the glass. It may have hit me rather than Harley, but he crossed the line.
Point proven, yeah.
You that's taking it into deathmatch territory, and now you got to face me at my own game, which we did on the last show of the year last year, and I think we were match of the night that night. I think we stole the show.
So good.
I'm very, very happy with how that match played out. I think there's not enough death matches with feuds.
Yeah.
You know? And that's what me and Kingsley wanted last year, was a death match where everybody could feel the genuine animosity rather than just two people trying to prove who's better. It was two people who really wanted to hurt each other. And I just don't think there's enough of that. So we were really proud of what we built, and it seemed to go over very, very well. So absolutely one of my favourite matches, like top 3 of my career, I would say.
Yeah, and Kingsley's first death match as well, which, that was, to have your first death match like that is an incredible sight.
It's like you said, Harley cut him with the first light tube. The first one he got hit with, he got
him though as well.
Gas, and I did not give him a second. And I'd warned him. I said, if you're bleeding on the floor, I'm going to pull you up and we're going to carry on that match. And he was bleeding on the floor, and I grabbed him, I pulled him up, and I hit him with another light tube. Like, he was informed before it was go time, and I wasn't stopping. We had something to deliver that day, and he felt weak. He was struggling. He did panic a little bit when the blood was all in his eyes and he couldn't see. But it shows you what a tough bastard he is. He's a lot of tough bastards to get through it like he did, and to not only get through it but like stay at the level. Like, he didn't dip. He in fact, he went harder.
Yeah.
So, full credit to Kingsley.
People should check, like, IWTV, check out. I won't spoil the ending of that match. The ending's visually beautiful. So, anyone that's not seen it, go check it out. And now you just started to have rivalries everywhere that are popping up, that people are like hearing. So you've got the one with Jack Harrop, which is becoming a big thing. Obviously, Jack Harrop's, for people that don't know him, is the son of one of the deathmatch legends of the UK, Iceman. So you've decided to go against
Iceman.
Yeah.
Iceman is so my trainer Styx showed me a match. I mean, you know, I'm the biggest Mick Foley fan in the world, and Styx, when he first started training me, was like, I've had a match against Mick Foley, you know, and it was an 8-man tag on I can't remember what show it was in this country, and it was the four British guys versus Mick Foley, Steve Corino, Sandman, and Alex Shane. So huge, ridiculous match. Are
Universal uproar in Coventry, yeah.
Yep.
That's insane.
And Iceman was in that match. My first visual experience of Iceman was watching him wrestle my hero. So you can imagine the kind of esteem I hold Iceman in.
Yeah.
The highest of esteem. He is one of the most important hardcore wrestlers in the history of the UK, if not the most important, because he was doing this when everybody else was saying it was dumb, it was stupid, it wasn't real wrestling, and he kept with it, and he made it matter. He made it matter to people. And the perspective has changed on deathmatch a little bit these days. I don't think people are quite so negative about it. I still don't think it's to everybody's taste, but I think people are slightly more accepting of it. And it wouldn't have been the case without Iceman pushing through boundaries and saying, no, this does matter. This does matter. This is a valid form of wrestling, a valid form of entertainment. So I hold Iceman in hugely high regard. Can't say the same about his son. I think he's a great wrestler. He had one of the best death matches I've ever seen against his dad. But I mean, we've just been through my whole story. You know that I didn't have any buys. I had to earn my way from start to finish. Start to finish. I didn't know anybody in deathmatch. I got to know people so that I could get involved in it. Jack, he's been wrestling 2 years. He's on all of these shows. How does that happen? It's because of who his dad is.
Yeah.
People are saying who's the best, Alton Thorne or Jack Harrop, and I'm saying, well, Jack Harrop's been handed a position. Like, whether we like it or not, how good he is, would he be in these positions without his dad being who he is? I don't think he fucking would. So I'm telling everybody outright I'm the best. If it's me and Jack, it will be me every single fucking time.
So you don't think highly of Jack?
I think incredibly highly of Jack. He has very entertaining matches. He's got incredible amount of heart. He cuts a beautiful promo, and he cares. He cares about wrestling. But people consider him one of my key competitions coming up in deathmatch at the moment. Like, I'm 2 years in. He's 2 years in. We're at the same position. Like, if it's got to be one of us, and it seems like it does. Like, there are more and more deathmatch wrestlers in this country. When I started doing this, there were like 5 of us, and I was the new one.
Yeah.
Now there's like 12, right? The pool is getting bigger, and people need to decide who's at the top of the fucking pool. And if it's going to be me and Jackie, he's going to be the one drowning at the bottom, and I'm going to be the one swimming to the top and climbing out and, doing whatever the fuck it takes.
Poor Jack. But no, it makes sense. It's that's why it's called deathmatch wrestling. It's dog eat dog kind of world. And then I said rivalry wise. There's a man that you've been having a rivalry with for a while. Sash. He's a lovely guy, isn't he?
He is a prick. He's a prick, right? I don't mind being fat shamed in every promo on every show. I'm aware of how big I am. Like, it's fine. It doesn't upset me none, right? I am absolutely fine with being the tactics being the same every show. I mean, if it works for Roman Reigns, why not for Sash, right?
Yeah.
Like, when does Roman not have somebody jump in and get involved and win the match like that? And he's called the best thing ever every single day. Like, Sash is just doing the same thing. Like, if I'm being completely honest, Sash is the most difficult rivalry I've ever had in wrestling. And the reason for that is because he's not just taking me on physically. He's played mental games with me the entire way. He's screwed with my house. He's screwed with my family. He's played every single mental game to try and get me to back out of this feud. But the reason I'm not backing out, the reason I will never back out of this feud is because it cannot be that you can just buy your way into whatever company you want, into whatever position you want. It cannot be that you can just put 4 people in a team and have them get involved and just sweep up every title. It's not good for the fans. It's not good for the business. It's not good for competition. And I'm not having it. Like, there's a reason that I'm a good guy, like a well-respected good guy in all of these companies, because I care about them. I care about future. And it pains me to see morons like him glide through on what he's got in his bank balance and how many people he can pay off. Right? So take all of the personal stuff out of it. Take all of the stuff he's done. That's what it boils down to. This is a genuine wrestling beef. It's what matters more. Is it heart or is it cash? And I'm going to prove over the next couple of months that heart will win every time. At the end of the day, the people want to see the good guy victorious, and that's what I'm going to give them.
Yeah, and to be fair, people just want to see Sash get battered as well. It's pretty much.
Because he's a mug. Because
Yeah.
he's a mug. He's the most annoying. Like, how many Sash matches do you remember? How many Sash it's all him jumping people and like neck breaking them and calling them fat in a promo. What? Go away and accomplish something. Don't buy all your accomplishments. You know, I've helped build deathmatch in this company from the ground up. What's he done? Paid off Vusic and Gallus. I'm not going to get too heated about it because I've done it a billion times. But like, I genuinely believe this stuff. I honestly do.
And a couple of questions we ask at the end of interviews. More deathmatch related, so we only ask it when we got deathmatch people along, 'cause it'll make no sense otherwise. What's the worst thing you've taken so far? Do you believe where you've kind of gone that sucked?
Very first deathmatch, wiffle bat, just like a little like plastic type bat, and it just had drawing pins glued to the outside of it. Right now, I didn't think it would hurt too much. I don't know why. I just had this impression that it'd be okay. It'd have some give. No give at all. All it was thumbtacks and the sharp bit of them being slammed so hard into my head that they bent against my skull like that. I had holes in my head for 3 weeks. In that moment, for 2 seconds, might be the most painful thing I've ever felt. Let alone like it was
first deathmatch.
Insanely painful. And I thought, okay, if that's the kind of pain that I can cope with it. I don't like it, but I can cope with it, and it hasn't got worse than that since. So yeah, I'd say that. It's funny because it doesn't sound that bad, but like really, really hurt the top of my head. Yeah, that.
And then one which we'll put a disclaimer at the start that you before you say the answer to this, HCW makes this stuff happen somehow. What's something you've actually wanted to take which you haven't taken so far?
I want to get thrown off a stage through some stuff.
Excellent. Okay.
Do I want to take like an 8 foot bump through a table, like flip bump through a table or something like that. You know those big moments like at the end of that's what I want. Like, cause I've done all the deathmatch weapons now. There's very little left. Like I've been wrapped in barbed wire and had been stapled, and I've done the whole lot, but I've never taken like a big bump like that. So that'd be my thing.
There we go. We got it out there. As I said, like Mantonio wanted to get his strimmer hit on him, and the next show he got it more than he wanted it.
Yeah, he changed his tune pretty quick, didn't he?
And then Gary J said he wanted to fight Tanaka as a dream match, and then so we make it happen here.
Oh, so fingers crossed that I'll get thrown off a stage very soon, then.
Thank you, HCW. And then the last question we normally ask on everyone: dream match of someone that's either retired or passed away, and then obviously a dream match of someone that's kind of around still wrestling.
So are they both against me?
Yes.
Just for
no, you're not observing. You're in them. Yeah.
Foley and Tremont. Foley for my retired guy. Tremont for current. They're the two death matches that if I could, I would have.
Brutal them. As well. Oh, you versus Tremont would be stupidly brutal.
Me versus Tremont, very, very similar like styles again. In fact, like Tremont was one of my favorite guys coming through. Him and Necro were probably the two guys that I loved the most when I first started out watching deathmatch on a consistent basis. So yeah, I think me and Tremont would have a blinding match. I'd also love to wrestle Casanova Valentine at some point as well. I think that would be another good match.
Yeah.
But yeah, the dream matches, Foley and Tremont.
Don't think I can make that happen. They were the triple. I don't think the Foley one I can make happen. Tremont probably will just miraculously appear. But yeah, we go then. So we've had Alton's Instagram on the screen. He has a Twitter. He hates it, but he's got a Twitter. We'll whack your Instagram for your the records in there as well, because I found it fascinating from the 5 minutes I looked at it. Is there anything else you want to plug?
It's quite interesting. It is pretty interesting. A lot of missing, but a lot of cool stuff on there as well.
Is there anything else you'd like to plug? I know you've got a shirt out.
Yeah. Inbox me. We've just released a new Hellbound T-shirt. It's a green kind of punk. It's like a kind of punk metal design. I bloody love it, and it's sold like gangbusters. We nearly sold 50 in the first couple of days. So get in touch. We'll get one of those ordered.
Okay, and then we'll be seeing you at Kumite this Sunday as well. Light work.
Yeah, speaking of which, we're on 1 hour, we're just like nearly hitting 2 hours, so I've got a minute to rant at you. What was going on with this last conversation I saw you have with Malachi, where you were like, well, let's hope that Alton Thorne survives Big Fucking Joe.
Oh,
I'm not just going to survive Big Fucking Joe.
I'm in danger.
I'm going to march through Big Fucking Joe. Right? Look, there is nobody... yeah, good plan. There is nobody on this planet that will face up to Big Fucking Joe like I will. I ain't gonna move from him. This is like what are you doing now? Irresistible force, immovable object. Right? We are the two biggest, if size for size, other than potentially Iceman, we are the two biggest wrestlers, deathmatch wrestlers in this country. He ain't walking through me. There's no free ride. There's no meal ticket here, right? Like it's never going to be that easy, and it's not going to be that easy come this time. He's already on a losing streak. You said I've got the momentum. You'll see what happens.
I remember you saying momentum. I'm glad we were all. But yeah, on that bombshell, like and subscribe. Well, Kumite this weekend, everyone go watch that. Tickets are still available, and it's at a new venue, the Hairy Dog, which sounds amazing.
Great venue.
It will be back at Vines Bar, I think, in June. So there's 2 shows, Hairy Dog, one in April, and then there's going to be the Vines Bar. So don't worry if you like the outside beer garden vibe, it's still there. But Kumite more year-round, which is what I want.
Love it. Favourite company to wrestle for? If we can, hopefully next year we'll do 6 or 7. We'll keep growing it.
Superb. And the people that run it, Malachi, Fletcher, just great people. Fletch, you'll get to see on your the Kumite will return for your Twitch streams, which we'll have in the description as well. And Malachi,
yeah, we should probably advertise that, right?
Yeah.
That will be happening 2 days after this lands on the Thursday. So please do come and join us. We're going to do a Kumite watch along of the first 2 shows. So that's the very first match, which is only 1 match, so we'll just be watching the main event, and then the second show, which is 3 matches, we'll be watching all 4 of those in the same night. That's Thursday, let me have a peek, the 22nd. Correct?
It's a Kumite week.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it from me. Anything else you'd like to bring up before we go?
I think we've covered everything, mate.
Sound. Well, that's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Here you go. Oh, yeah.